Princess Lyrali stood in the great hall of the Zephyrian Empire, her violet eyes filled with anger and sadness. The crystal walls around her glowed softly, reflecting the light from her skin. She was beautiful, like all her people, with pale blue skin that sparkled and long silver hair that moved like water. But today she felt ugly inside. "You cannot ask this of me, father," she said, her voice shaking. The words echoed in the huge room where the Galactic Council met. Emperor Valdris looked at his daughter with tired eyes. He was old now, older than he looked. The war had aged him in ways that showed only to those who knew him well. His golden robes seemed too heavy on his shoulders. "I do not ask, Lyrale. I command," he said quietly. "The war must end. Too many have died." Lyrale knew he was right. For 3 years, the Zephyrian Empire had fought the humans. At first, everyone thought it would be easy. Humans were new to space travel. They had crude ships and simple weapons. The Zephyrians could read minds and control energy with their thoughts. They had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. But the humans were different. They fought in ways no one expected. When the Zephyrians attacked their cities, the humans would abandon them and attack somewhere else. When the Empire sent their best generals, the humans would disappear and strike from behind. They learned fast and adapted faster. Now both sides were tired. Billions had died on hundreds of worlds. The galaxy was burning and no one could win. "The human Admiral Chen has made an offer," Emperor Valdris continued. "A marriage alliance. You will marry him and our peoples will have peace." Lyrali had seen the message. Admiral Marcus Chen of the Human Coalition wanted to marry her. Not for love, but to stop the killing. It was smart politics, but it felt like a prison sentence to her. "What do you know about this human?" she asked. "Little," her father admitted. "He is their military leader. Young for his rank. They say he is brilliant. That is all." Lyrali closed her eyes. She could feel the thoughts of everyone in the room. Her people's minds were like bright lights full of hope and fear. They wanted peace so badly they could taste it. How could she deny them that? "If I do this," she said slowly, "what happens to me? Do I live on their world? Do I become human?" "You become a bridge," Emperor Valdris said. "You help our peoples understand each other. You make sure the peace lasts." Lyrali nodded slowly. She had no choice and she knew it. "I accept." 3 weeks later, she stood on Concordia Station, a neutral place between human and Zephyrian space. The wedding would happen here, broadcast to both empires. She wore a white dress that combined human and Zephyrian styles. It felt strange and uncomfortable. The humans had arrived that morning. Lyrali had expected an army, but only a small group came. They looked nervous around her people. She could feel their fear through their thoughts. All except one. Admiral Marcus Chen stood at the altar waiting for her. He was not what she expected. He was average height with brown hair and kind eyes. He looked normal, like any human soldier. But something was different about him. When Lyrali tried to read his mind, she found nothing. No thoughts, no emotions, just empty space. It was like looking into a dark room. This had never happened to her before. All humans were easy to read. Their minds were simple and open compared to her people. "Princess Lyrali," Marcus said when she reached him. His voice was calm and respectful. "Thank you for this sacrifice." "Admiral Chen," she replied, studying his face. "I hope you understand what this means." "I do," he said. "I will do everything I can to honor it." The ceremony was short. They spoke vows in both languages. When Marcus spoke Zephyrian, his accent was perfect. Better than perfect, actually. He sounded like he had been born speaking it. Another strange thing about this human. When they kissed to seal the marriage, Lyrali felt a shock run through her body. Not unpleasant, just surprising. For a moment, she thought she felt something from his mind, like a door opening just a crack. Then it was gone. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. The war was over. Later, at the reception, Lyrali watched her new husband. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence. He spoke to Zephyrian nobles in their own language, making jokes they laughed at. He discussed trade routes with merchants and military tactics with generals. Everyone seemed to like him. "Your husband is not what I expected," said Lady Vera, one of Lyrali's friends. She was younger than Lyrali and had always been jealous of her position. "What did you expect?" Lyrali asked, "A barbarian." "A crude soldier who grunts and points," Vera sipped her wine. "This one seems almost civilized." Lyrali watched Marcus talking to a group of human diplomats. Even among his own people, he seemed different. They looked at him with respect, but also something else. Fear? No, that was not right. It was more like awe. "Admiral Chen," she called out. He turned immediately as if he had been waiting for her voice. "Please call me Marcus," he said, walking over. "We are married now." "Marcus," she said, testing the name. "How long have you studied our language?" "A few years," he said. "I find languages interesting. You speak it very well. Better than most humans." Something flickered in his eyes. "I had good teachers." The party continued late into the night. Finally, it was time to go to their quarters. They would spend one night on Concordia before traveling to New Geneva, the human capital world. Their rooms were large and elegant, with separate bedrooms connected by a living area. Marcus showed her to her door first. "Good night, Lyrelay," he said. "Sleep well." "That is all?" She asked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "We are married. In Zephyrian culture." "I know what marriage means," Marcus said gently. "But this is not a normal marriage. You were forced into this. I will not add to that burden." Lyrelay stared at him. She had expected many things from this human, but kindness was not one of them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Good night," he said again, and went to his own room. Lyrelay lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her life had changed completely in one day. She was married to an alien. She would live on an alien world. She would probably never see her home again, but Marcus seemed different from what she expected. He was intelligent and respectful. He spoke her language perfectly and understood her culture. There were mysteries about him, like his unreadable mind and the way his own people looked at him. Maybe this would not be as terrible as she thought. In the next room, Marcus Chen sat by the window looking out at the stars. He had not lied to Lyrelay, but he had not told her the whole truth either. There were things about him that would frighten her, things that would make her understand why the war had really ended, but those secrets could wait. For now it was enough that she did not hate him. That was more than he had hoped for. Tomorrow they would begin their new life together. And maybe, if he was very careful, she would never need to know what he really was. 6 months had passed since the wedding, and Lyrelay's life on New Geneva was nothing like she had expected. The human capital world was beautiful in its own way, with blue skies and green forests that reminded her of ancient Zephyrian poetry. Their home was a large building that served as both residence and diplomatic center. Every day brought new surprises about her husband. This morning, she found Marcus in his study reading 3 books at once. One was written in ancient Scythian, a language so old that most scholars needed translation software. Another was in Zephyrian mathematical script, which used symbols instead of words. The third was in something she did not recognize at all. "Good morning," she said, setting down his coffee. He drank it black like most humans. "Good morning," he replied, looking up with a smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." She glanced at the books. "What are you reading?" "Research," he said simply. "The Kethian trade delegation arrives next week. I want to understand their culture better." Lyrelay picked up the book in Zephyrian mathematical script. "This is very advanced. Even I have trouble with some of these concepts." "Mathematics is universal," Marcus said. "Once you understand the patterns, language does not matter." She had heard him say things like this before. Marcus had a way of making difficult things sound simple. He spoke 17 languages fluently, more than most professional diplomats. He understood science, history, art, and politics with equal ease. But whenever she asked about his past, he became quiet. "Marcus," she said, sitting down across from him, "tell me about your family." His hands stopped turning the pages. For a moment, his face showed something she rarely saw there. Pain. "They died in the war," he said quietly. "I am sorry. I did not mean to." "It is okay." He closed the books carefully. "They died in the first attack on Terran Colony 7. My parents, my sister, her children, all of them." Lyrelay felt a rush of sympathy. She reached out to touch his hand, forgetting for a moment that she could not read his thoughts. With other humans, she could sense their emotions even when they tried to hide them. With Marcus, there was only silence. "How long ago?" she asked. 4 years, he said. "I joined the military afterward." "You were very young to become an admiral." Something flickered in his eyes again, that strange look she had seen before. "I was good at my job." The conversation ended when his aide announced visitors. A group of human officials had come to discuss trade agreements. Marcus stood up, and suddenly he was Admiral Chen again, confident and in control. Lyrelay watched him work throughout the day. He had a gift for making people comfortable. The human officials respected him, but she noticed they also seemed nervous around him. They always stood a little too straight when he entered a room, spoke a little too carefully when addressing him. That evening, they attended a dinner party at the Terran embassy. Lyrelei wore a blue dress that complemented her skin, and Marcus wore his dress uniform. They made a striking couple, and she could feel the eyes of other guests following them. "The princess looks beautiful tonight," said Ambassador Reynolds. "An older human woman with kind eyes." "She always does," Marcus replied, offering Lyrelei his arm. They mingled with the crowd, making small talk about politics and trade. Lyrelei was getting better at human social customs, though they still seemed strange to her. Humans talked around subjects instead of directly about them, and they smiled even when they were not happy. Halfway through the evening, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in red. Security guards appeared from nowhere, surrounding the important guests. Someone shouted orders in the darkness. "Stay calm," Marcus said quietly, but his voice had changed. It was colder now, more focused. "There has been an attack on the main power grid." "How do you know that?" Lyrelei asked. "I just do." The lights came back on after 10 minutes. The security chief announced that terrorists had tried to destroy the embassy's power supply, but they had been stopped. 3 attackers were dead, 1 captured. "How did you respond so quickly?" a reporter asked the security chief. "We had advance warning," the man replied, looking uncomfortable. Lyrelei looked at Marcus. He was adjusting his uniform sleeve, but she caught a glimpse of something on his wrist. A device of some kind, glowing softly blue. When he noticed her looking, he pulled his sleeve down quickly. "Shall we go home?" he asked. In the car ride back, Lyrelei could not stop thinking about what she had seen. Marcus had known about the attack before it happened. The device on his wrist had been active, and the way he had moved when the lights went out, too fast, too sure. "Marcus," she said as they entered their home, "what was that device on your wrist?" "Just a communication device," he said. "Standard military equipment. I have never seen one like it. The military has a lot of equipment you have not seen." He was avoiding her questions again, the way he always did when she got too close to something important. Lyrelei was beginning to understand that her husband had many secrets. Over the following weeks, she paid more attention to the strange things about Marcus. Electronic devices sometimes flickered when he was angry. He never seemed to get sick, even when a flu outbreak affected half the embassy staff. He could go days without sleep when they had important negotiations, and his reflexes were impossible. She saw it clearly one afternoon when they were walking in the garden. A maintenance robot malfunctioned and fell from a high tree, heading straight for her head. Marcus moved so fast that her eyes could barely follow him. One moment he was 3 steps away. The next he was catching the heavy robot with one hand. "Are you all right?" he asked, setting the robot down gently. Lyrelei stared at him. "How did you move so fast?" "Adrenaline," he said, but he would not meet her eyes. That night she decided to investigate. While Marcus slept, she accessed the embassy's computer system. Her diplomatic status gave her some access to human military records. Though most files about Marcus were classified beyond her clearance level, what she found made her more confused, not less. Marcus Chen had appeared in military records 3 years ago, with no prior history. His psychological evaluations were strange, full of notes about exceptional adaptation and unique capabilities. There were references to something called Project Prometheus, but those files were completely blocked. Most disturbing of all, there were medical reports that made no sense. Marcus had been treated for injuries that should have killed him, but he had healed in days instead of months. His blood work showed anomalies that the doctors could not explain. The next morning, Lyrelei confronted him over breakfast. "I know you are not telling me everything," she said. Marcus set down his coffee cup carefully. "What do you mean?" "Your military records, your reflexes, the way electronics behave around you." She leaned forward. "What is Project Prometheus?" For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he sighed. "How much do you really want to know?" he asked. "Everything. Even if it changes how you see me? Even if it makes you afraid?" Lyrelei thought about that. Over the past 6 months, she had grown to care for Marcus. Not love, not yet, but something deeper than friendship. He was kind to her, respectful, and genuinely interesting to talk to. Whatever his secrets were, she did not think they would make her hate him. Yes, she said. I want to know. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. For a long time he stared out at the garden where he had caught the falling robot. I am not entirely human anymore, he said finally. The Prometheus program changed me. Changed all of us. What do you mean, changed? Enhanced, improved, made into something more than human. He turned to face her. The war with your people was not the real war, Lyrelay. It was just a distraction from something much worse. Lyrelay felt cold suddenly. What could be worse than our war? Marcus looked at her with eyes that seemed much older than his face. Something is coming, he said. Something that makes our war look like a playground fight. And people like me are the only thing standing between it and the destruction of everything we know. Outside, the sun was shining and birds were singing, but Lyrelay felt like the world had suddenly become a much darker place. 1 year had passed since the wedding, and Lyrelay's feelings for Marcus had grown deeper and more complicated. She cared for him, possibly even loved him, but his revelation about Project Prometheus had created a wall between them. He had told her he was enhanced, but he would not explain what that meant. Every day brought new questions without answers. Tonight was particularly important. The hegemony of Keth had sent their ambassador to discuss joining the peace talks. The Kethians were a warrior species, known for their aggression and their powerful military. If they could be brought into the alliance, it would strengthen the peace considerably. Ambassador Zorkan was exactly what Lyrelay expected from a Kethian. He was huge, with gray skin covered in ritual scars and eyes like black stones. He spoke basic with a thick accent and made it clear he thought humans were weak and Zephyrians were soft. Your little peace will not last, he said during dinner, cutting his meat with violent strokes. Humans expand too fast. Soon they will want our worlds too. Marcus remained calm. The human coalition has no interest in Kethian space. All species say this. Then they grow hungry for more. Zorkan's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Perhaps we should remind the galaxy why Kethians are feared. Lyrelay felt tension growing around the table. Several human officials looked nervous. The Kethian delegation seemed pleased by their ambassador's aggressive words. What kind of reminder did you have in mind? Marcus asked quietly. A demonstration. Your border colonies are soft targets. A few attacks would show everyone that Kethians are not to be ignored. That would be unwise, Marcus said, his voice still calm. Zorkan leaned forward. Are you threatening me, human? I am giving you advice. I do not need advice from a species that barely learned to fly between stars. Marcus excused himself politely and left the dining room. Lyrelay tried to continue the conversation, but Zorkan seemed more interested in making threats than negotiating. The dinner ended badly with the Kethians promising to consider their options. 20 minutes after the ambassador returned to his ship, his communication device started beeping urgently. What is it? Lyrelay heard him snap at his aide. The aide whispered something that made Zorkan's face turn pale gray. Impossible, the ambassador said. Check again, more whispering. Zorkan stood up abruptly, his massive frame shaking with what looked like fear. Ambassador, Marcus said, returning to the room as if nothing had happened. Is there a problem? 3 of our military bases, Zorkan said slowly. They have gone dark. Complete system failures, all at the same time. How unfortunate, Marcus replied. Equipment failures can be so unpredictable. Zorkan stared at him. These were our newest installations, the most secure facilities in Kethian space. Technology is complicated. Sometimes things just break. The ambassador's eyes narrowed. The timing is very convenient, is it? Marcus smiled politely. I am sure your engineers will figure out what went wrong. Zorkan said nothing more, but his attitude had completely changed. Instead of threatening, he seemed nervous. Before he left, he signed a preliminary agreement to join the peace talks. After the Kethians departed, Lyrelay confronted Marcus in their private quarters. What did you do? She demanded. I had dinner with difficult guests, Marcus said, loosening his tie. Do not play games with me. 3 Kethian bases do not just fail at the same time. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. No, they do not. So you did something. I made a phone call. Lyrelay stared at him. A phone call destroyed 3 military bases? I made a request. Other people carried it out. What people? What kind of request? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The kind of request that saves lives by preventing a war. You are enhanced humans. Prometheus soldiers. She was starting to understand. How many of you are there? Fewer than you might think. More than our enemies know. What can you do? Marcus looked at her with tired eyes. Things that would frighten you. I am already frightened. Not of you, but of not knowing. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, New Geneva sparkled with millions of lights. Somewhere out there, Lyrelei realized, were other people like Marcus. Enhanced humans with abilities that could cripple military installations with a phone call. The Prometheus program has 7 generations, Marcus said finally. Each generation is more advanced than the last. I am Generation 7. What does that mean? It means I was volunteers for procedures that changed my DNA. We integrated genetic material from dozens of alien species. Some we traded with, some we found on dead worlds, some we took from prisoners during the war. Lyrelei felt sick. You experiment on prisoners? Not me personally. But yes, the program did. We needed to understand how other species work, how they think, how they heal, how they adapt. That is monstrous. Yes, it is. Marcus turned to face her. It is also necessary. Necessary for what? To fight something worse than the Kethians. Worse than any species in this galaxy. Lyrelei wanted to ask more questions, but Marcus's communication device beeped. He looked at it and frowned. We need to go to the command center, he said. Now. They took a private transport to the military complex in the center of the city. The command center was a large room full of screens and computers buzzing with activity. Admiral Sarah Park, the head of Human Defense Forces, met them at the entrance. When did it start? Marcus asked. 20 minutes ago. Long-range sensors picked them up at the edge of Sector 7. How many? 12 ships. Maybe more. They are not responding to any communication attempts. Lyrelei followed them to the main screen. It showed a star map with red dots moving slowly toward inhabited systems. What ships? She asked. Unknown design, Admiral Park said. They do not match any species in our database. The energy signatures are off the scale. Marcus studied the screen with intense focus. Show me the tactical analysis. Numbers and charts flashed on the screen. Lyrelei could not understand most of it, but she could see that the unknown ships were massive and heavily armed. They have already destroyed 3 colonies. Admiral Park continued. No survivors. No wreckage. The planets are just empty. Empty how? Lyrelei asked. No life signs. No structures. Like everything was just erased. Marcus's face had gone completely white. Send immediate alerts to all Prometheus teams. Full activation protocols. Sir, that will expose the program. The program does not matter anymore. Marcus turned to Lyrelei. I need you to contact your father immediately. Tell him to mobilize the Imperial fleet. Why? What is happening? Marcus looked at the screen where the red dots continued their slow advance toward more populated systems. The enemy we have been preparing for, he said quietly. They have finally arrived. What enemy? The Void Hierarchy. An ancient species that feeds on other civilizations. They have been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, consuming everything in their path. Lyrelei felt cold terror wash over her. How do you know about them? Because we found the ruins of their last visit to this galaxy. 50,000 years ago, they destroyed every advanced civilization here. The few survivors left warnings for whoever came after. And you knew they would return? We hoped we were wrong. We prepared just in case we were right. Marcus's hands were shaking slightly. Now we know. On the screen, the red dots moved closer to inhabited worlds. Somewhere out there, billions of people had no idea that death was coming for them. What can we do? Lyrelei whispered. Marcus looked at her with eyes full of determination and fear. Everything we can, he said. And hope it is enough. The war that had brought them together was over. But the real war, the one that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy, was just beginning. And Lyrelei was starting to understand that her husband was not just a soldier or a diplomat. He was a weapon designed specifically to fight an enemy that could destroy entire worlds. The question was whether that weapon would be enough. 18 months after their wedding, Lyrelei thought she understood her husband. She was wrong. The Void Hierarchy had been attacking outer colonies for 3 weeks. Each assault followed the same pattern. Massive black ships would appear, surround a planet, and within hours every living thing would be gone. Not killed, not destroyed, simply erased as if they had never existed. The combined fleets of the human coalition, Zephyrian Empire, and their allies had tried to stop them. Traditional weapons had no effect. The void ships absorbed energy attacks and ignored kinetic weapons. Worse, they seemed to learn from each encounter, adapting their defenses faster than anyone could adapt their attacks. Today, they were coming to New Geneva. Lyrelay stood in the emergency command center, watching the main screen show 12 enormous void ships approaching the planet. Each ship was the size of a city, black as space itself, with strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Evacuation is 60% complete, Admiral Park reported, but we will not get everyone off in time. Then we make our stand here, Marcus said calmly. He had changed over the past 3 weeks. The kind, thoughtful man she married was still there, but something else was emerging. Something harder and more focused. He spent hours in private communications with other Prometheus soldiers making plans she was not allowed to hear. Marcus, she said quietly, what are you going to do? What I was designed to do. The fleet can handle this. We have hundreds of ships. Marcus looked at the tactical display showing their combined forces. Human, Zephyrian, and Keithian ships formed a defensive line around the planet. It looked impressive until you compared it to the approaching void vessels. Our ships will buy time, he said. Nothing more. Then what? Before Marcus could answer, alerts started flashing across every screen. The void ships had begun their attack. The first wave hit the outer defense line like a black wave against sand castles. Zephyrian energy weapons that could melt asteroids simply vanished when they touched the void ships. Human missiles exploded harmlessly against their hulls. The ships themselves seemed to absorb the attacks, growing larger and darker with each hit. They are feeding on our weapons, Admiral Park said in horror. Every attack makes them stronger. Pull back the fleet, Marcus ordered. Minimum safe distance. Sir, that leaves the planet defenseless. No, it does not. Marcus walked to a special console that Lyrelay had never seen before. When he placed his hand on it, the device glowed with the same blue light she had seen on his wrist months ago. Prometheus 7 to all units, he said into the communicator. Full authorization. Planetary Defense Protocol. Marcus, what are you doing? Lyrelay asked. Becoming what I really am. The answer came in the form of 11 other signals responding to Marcus's call. Across the planet, other Generation 7 Prometheus soldiers were activating. Lyrelay could see their locations appear on the tactical map. 1 in each major city, plus Marcus here in the capital. 12 of you, she whispered, against 12 ships. The numbers are not coincidence, Marcus said. We were designed specifically for this threat. On the main screen, the void ships had reached orbit. They positioned themselves around the planet in perfect formation, each one directly above a major population center. Then they began to descend. Energy readings are off the scale, a technician reported. They are charging some kind of weapon. Life-draining technology, Marcus explained. In 10 minutes, they will activate it. Every living thing on the planet will be consumed to feed their ships. Then stop them. I am going to try. Marcus began removing his uniform jacket. Underneath, he wore a simple black shirt that seemed to shimmer with its own light. As Lyrelay watched, the shirt began to change, flowing over his body like liquid metal until it covered him completely in a form-fitting suit. Marcus, this is my real uniform, he said. His voice sounded different now, coming through the suit systems. Watch the screen. On the tactical display, 12 small dots appeared, one rising from each city toward the void ships above. The dots moved impossibly fast, accelerating beyond anything that should be possible for a human body. Those are people? Admiral Park asked in disbelief. Enhanced people, Marcus corrected. Generation 7 Prometheus soldiers have been modified with DNA from 43 different species. We can survive in space, move at high speeds, and channel energy in ways that normal humans cannot. Lyrelay watched the dots on the screen reach the void ships. Then explosions began to flash across the enemy vessels. They are fighting the ships directly? She asked. We are the only weapons that work against them. The void hierarchy feeds on technology and energy, but they cannot feed on living beings who carry genetic patterns they have never encountered before. On the screen, the battle was unlike anything Lyrelay had ever seen. The Prometheus soldiers moved around the void ships like insects attacking giants, but their attacks were having an effect. Sections of the black hulls were cracking and bleeding strange dark fluid, but the ships were fighting back. Energy beams swept through space trying to target the small, fast-moving figures. One beam caught a Prometheus soldier, and his signal disappeared from the screen. Johnson is down, Admiral Park reported quietly. Marcus's jaw tightened. but he continued coordinating the attack. Martinez, take Johnson's target. Williams, concentrate fire on the primary ship. Which one is the primary ship? Lyrelai asked. Marcus pointed to the largest vessel hovering directly above their city. That one contains the hierarchy's field commander. If we can destroy it, the others will retreat. What happens if you cannot destroy it? Then we try something more drastic. On the screen, the battle was intensifying. The Prometheus soldiers had managed to cripple 3 of the smaller ships, but the primary vessel seemed almost undamaged. Worse, it was beginning to glow with an ominous red light. Life drain sequence is starting, a technician announced. They are powering up their primary weapon. Marcus made a decision. All units fall back to minimum range. I am going in alone. Marcus, no. Lyrelai grabbed his arm. There has to be another way. There is. But you will not like it. What do you mean? Marcus looked at her through the suit's visor. His eyes were glowing with the same blue light as his equipment. The Prometheus program has a final option. Something we hoped we would never have to use. He paused. I can unlock the full potential of my enhancements, but doing so will change me permanently. I might not be the same person when it is over. How not the same? The alien DNA in my system will become dominant. I will have all their abilities, but I might lose my human consciousness. My memories of being human might fade. Lyrelai felt tears forming in her eyes. There has to be another way. Not for this enemy. This is what I was made for. Marcus leaned forward and kissed her through the visor. For a moment, the blue glow in his eyes dimmed, and she could see the man she had married. If I forget who I am, he said quietly, help me remember. Then he was gone, launching himself through the command center's emergency airlock and rocketing toward space. Lyrelai watched on the screen as Marcus's signal accelerated toward the primary void ship. The massive vessel turned its weapons on him, filling space with deadly energy beams. But Marcus moved like liquid light, dodging attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. When he reached the ship, something extraordinary happened. Instead of attacking the hull, Marcus placed his hands on its surface and began to glow brighter and brighter. The light spread from his body into the ship itself like infection spreading through a wound. What is he doing? Admiral Park whispered. Lyrelai could feel something through her telepathic senses. Not Marcus's thoughts, which had always been blocked to her, but something else, power, raw, incredible power that seemed to fill space around the ship. He is becoming something new, she said softly. On the screen, the void ship began to crack. Light poured out of the fractures, not the red light of their weapons, but the blue light that surrounded Marcus. The ship was being transformed from the inside out. Then it exploded. The explosion was unlike any weapon discharge Lyrelai had ever seen. Instead of fire and debris, the ship simply came apart in waves of blue energy that spread outward like ripples in a pond. When the energy waves touched the other void ships, they began to retreat immediately, fleeing the system as fast as their dark engines could carry them. Life signs? Admiral Park asked urgently. The technician scanned the area where the ship had been destroyed. I am detecting one human life sign. Very faint. He is alive, but barely. Rescue ships reached Marcus 20 minutes later. When they brought him to the medical bay, Lyrelai barely recognized him. His hair had turned silver and his skin had a faint blue glow that pulsed with his heartbeat. His eyes, when they opened, were completely blue with no visible pupils. Marcus, she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment and she feared he did not remember her. Then he smiled and she could see her husband still there behind the alien features. Hello, wife, he said softly. Are you still you? Mostly, he said. I remember everything. I remember loving you, but I am also something more now. Lyrelai took his hand. It was warm, but energy flickered between his fingers like tiny lightning. What happens now? She asked. Marcus looked out the window at the space where the void ships had been. Now we prepare, he said. They will be back and next time they will bring more ships. But we stopped them today. 2 years after the first void attack, the galaxy had changed completely. The old boundaries between human and alien space no longer mattered. Every species now worked together against the common threat. Lyrelai stood in the new Galactic Defense Command Center, watching reports come in from across known space. The void hierarchy had returned with hundreds of ships, attacking multiple systems simultaneously. This time they were not just feeding on planets. They were opening permanent rifts in space itself, creating doorways for even larger forces to enter the galaxy. The Andraste system has fallen, Admiral Park reported. 40 billion people, gone in 3 hours. Marcus studied the tactical displays with eyes that now glowed permanently blue. The transformation that had begun during the first battle had continued over the past 2 years. He was taller now, and his movements had an inhuman grace. Energy flickered constantly around his hands, and when he concentrated, the air itself seemed to bend around him. But he was still her husband. Still the man who brought her coffee in the morning and listened to her worries at night. "How many ships do we have in range?" he asked. 200 combined fleet vessels, plus 8 Prometheus teams. Marcus shook his head. "Not enough. We need to try the Nexus Protocol." Lyrelai had heard whispers about the Nexus Protocol, but no one would explain what it was. From the worried looks on the faces around them, it was clearly dangerous. "Sir," Admiral Park said carefully, "the protocol is theoretical. We have never tested it on this scale. Then today we learn if it works." Marcus activated his communication system, speaking to other Prometheus soldiers scattered across the galaxy. Lyrelai could only hear his side of the conversation, but she could tell he was asking them to do something they were not sure about. "What is the Nexus Protocol?" she asked when he finished. Marcus looked at her with those alien eyes that still held human love. "Remember when I told you that the Prometheus program used DNA from many species? Some of that DNA came from races that fought the Void Hierarchy millions of years ago. You told me that. What I did not tell you is that some of those races were not just fighters. They were connected to something larger, something that exists between dimensions." Lyrelai felt a chill. "What kind of something?" "The original inhabitants of this galaxy. The first ones. They existed before matter and energy as we understand them. When the Void Hierarchy destroyed their physical forms, their consciousness retreated to spaces between reality. And you can contact them? The DNA we carry contains genetic memories from species that serve them. Under extreme stress, those memories can activate." Marcus paused. "But doing so will change us completely. We will become conduits for forces that exist beyond normal spacetime." "You mean you will stop being human?" "I mean we will become something that can save the galaxy." Before Lyrelai could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. On the main screen, a massive rift was opening in space above New Geneva itself. Through the rift, she could see the dark outline of something enormous moving in the space between dimensions. "Void Mothership," Admiral Park whispered. "It is 10 times larger than anything we have seen before." The ship that emerged from the rift was beyond imagination. It stretched for thousands of kilometers, its black surface covered with structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Smaller ships poured out of it like insects from a hive, each one larger than the vessels that had attacked before. "All fleet units engage immediately," Marcus ordered. "Do not let them establish a foothold." The battle began instantly. Every ship in the system opened fire on the Void Fleet, but their weapons had even less effect than before. The enemy ships absorbed the attacks and grew larger, feeding on the energy directed at them. "They have adapted," Admiral Park said. "Our weapons are making them stronger." "All ships cease fire and retreat," Marcus commanded. "Prometheus teams initiate Nexus Protocol immediately." "Marcus," Lyrelai grabbed his arm. "If you do this, will I ever see you again?" "I do not know," he admitted. "But if we do not try, there will be no one left to remember any of us." He kissed her one last time, and she could feel energy flowing between them. For a moment their minds touched, and she sensed the vast alien intelligences that lived in his genetic memory. Then Marcus was gone, teleporting directly into space to join the other Prometheus soldiers. On the screen, Lyrelai watched 11 figures arrange themselves around the massive Void Mothership. They looked impossibly small against the enormous vessel, like specks of dust challenging a mountain. But when they began the Nexus Protocol, everything changed. Light erupted from each Prometheus soldier, not the blue energy she had seen before, but something that seemed to exist beyond the normal spectrum. The light spread between them, forming geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Where the patterns intersected, space itself began to crack. "What are they doing?" Admiral Park asked. "Opening doorways," Lyrelai whispered, suddenly understanding. "They are calling the first ones back to this dimension." The cracks in space widened, and through them came things that had no physical form. They were made of pure thought and will, beings that existed as patterns of consciousness without bodies. As they entered normal space, they took shapes that the human mind could barely comprehend. Geometries that folded in on themselves, structures that seemed to exist in all directions at once. The void ships immediately changed their behavior. Instead of attacking, they began to retreat. For the first time since the war began, they showed something that looked like fear. But the mothership did not retreat. Instead, it opened like a flower, revealing its true nature. It was not just a ship, but a living creature. A creature made of hunger and darkness, with intelligence that spanned galaxies and had consumed entire civilizations. The battle between the first ones and the void entity took place on levels that normal matter could not comprehend. Reality itself bent and twisted as forces beyond physics clashed. Space turned inside out, time flowed backward, and the laws of nature became suggestions rather than rules. In the middle of it all, the Prometheus soldiers burned like stars, channeling powers that no human body was designed to contain. Lyra Lee watched Marcus's life signs fluctuate wildly as alien DNA overwrote his human genetics completely. "He is dying," the medical officer reported. "No," Lyra Lee said, feeling something through their connection. "He is becoming something else." She was right. One by one, the Prometheus soldiers stopped being human. Their bodies dissolved into pure energy, but their consciousness remained, now connected directly to the first ones. They had become bridges between dimensions, living gateways that allowed ancient powers to enter the fight. The void entity realized its mistake too late. It had expected to fight ships and weapons, not the original inhabitants of the galaxy. The first ones had been waiting millions of years for this chance at revenge. The battle ended with the void entity's destruction, but the victory came at a cost. The dimensional barriers around the galaxy had been permanently altered. The first ones could now exist in normal space, but so could other things from the spaces between dimensions. When the fighting ended, Lyra Lee waited anxiously for the Prometheus soldiers to return. Only 6 came back, and they were no longer entirely human. Their bodies were composed of both matter and energy, shifting constantly between physical and ethereal states. Marcus materialized in front of her, and for a moment she was not sure it was really him. He was taller, more angular, and his skin seemed to be made of starlight. But when he spoke, his voice was the same. "Hello, wife," he said softly. "Are you still you? I am who I was and more. I remember being human. I remember loving you. But I also remember being part of something vast and ancient." He reached out to touch her face, and his hand felt like warm light. "The question is whether you can love what I have become." Lyra Lee looked at this being who had once been her husband. He was alien now, more alien than she was. But she could still see Marcus in his eyes, still feel his care for her. "I fell in love with your mind and your heart," she said. "Those are still there." "They are," he agreed. "Changed, but still there." Around them, the command center was celebrating victory. The void threat had been ended and the galaxy was safe. But Lyra Lee knew that the real work was just beginning. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus gestured to the other transformed Prometheus soldiers. "We become guardians. The dimensional barriers are weakened now. Other threats will come. Things that normal military forces cannot fight. We will be ready for them. And us? What happens to our marriage?" Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked almost human again. "We adapt, we learn. We find new ways to be together." Lyra Lee took his hand, feeling energy flow between them. Through their connection, she could sense the vast intelligence he had become connected to, but also the core of love and humanity that remained. 5 years later, they stood together on the observation deck of the new Galactic Guardian station, watching their children play in the garden below. The children were extraordinary, natural hybrids of human, Zephyrian, and something beyond both species. They could manipulate matter with their thoughts and see across dimensions, but they still laughed like